Good morning, good night, and good luck. However you would want to phrase that. I'm John. I'm the co-host of Comm Center. Just waiting for anybody to show up. If nobody shows up, that's fine. It's Comm Center Coffee, or Comm Center Coffee Break, or whatever you would want to call it. Maybe no one wants to call it anything. I'm back. Last week, I was not able to go anywhere, or I was not able to be on the after show because I was traveling. I was on vacation. My notification just came through that the show's live, so it looks like there's about a minute delay anyway. It's interesting. Good morning from Bone Coals Fleas Austin, who misspelled my name. That is all right. Good morning. How are things up in that part of Minnesota that I don't know much about? A couple of things this morning that I'll address briefly on this extremely short episode of Comm Center Coffee that I swear to God will not be extremely long. I always say that, and then it's always like 38 minutes long. We talked about this a few weeks ago. The 911 outage that we had a while back, a couple weeks ago. And I remember mentioning how the official explanation is that it was some kind of cut fiber line. I'm going to dive deeper into that explanation and explain why it doesn't make sense and how the things that you're seeing in the media are just made up. First of all, I'm going to do a little transparency. I get on the internet and I talk about stuff. And so I am exactly the same thing as a journalist. I don't have to do a lot of research. I don't have to know a lot of stuff. Sometimes when you're podcasting and you have to put on a show, you do the best you can. You want to be well informed. You don't want to have the rug pulled out from underneath you. But sometimes you get on a show and regardless of your level of preparation, you have to sound pretty confident of what you're talking about. Otherwise, you're just going to sit there and not say anything, and that doesn't make for a good podcast. Unfortunately, the news is a lot like that. And I begin to notice it now that I'm doing podcasting, that sometimes you'll see the news, you'll see these talking heads, whether it's on a morning show or whatever, but a subject of discussion will come up, something in the news, and they put somebody on the air to talk about it. Like that person is an expert, like that person knows what they're talking about, like that person is an expert or someone inscrutable, someone to be trusted, someone you can be relied upon. And I tell you now that the news will just dig these people up from anywhere. I've had people who wanted to talk on the air about various things, and depending on what the show is, sometimes I'll be, oh yeah, okay. I mean, you're talking about your personal experiences. You're an expert on that, but a lot of other times, like I don't really have a strong desire to put them on there. So this comes from NPR. And I want to address what NPR is, first of all, because NPR, at cursory glance, seems like the comfortable radio network where people wear big, thick sweaters and they drink coffee and they have warm intellectual conversations that are designed to be thought-provoking, but ultimately some degree of comforting. Here's what it really is it's money confiscated from you. You go to work every day, and then while you're working, Joe Biden, Uncle Sam, literally pickpocket you. They reach into your wallet, and they take out this money, and they send it over to NPR so that NPR can talk to like 3 people in your community. NPR is the government radio. NPR is the BBC. NPR is basically Soviet propaganda. The Soviets controlled all of their state media, just like the Chinese do today. Same thing with I believe Turkey, China. And so it was definitely a threat for the Soviet Union, for anyone in their country to find out what was truly going on in the West, to the point where they controlled all radio, just not even just national radio or national broadcast, but they also prohibited anyone from spreading information locally through like local radio stations. So when you're in Soviet Russia, you could never have anything like what we have in the United States. And although NPR is not a big deal and not widely followed, it's just important to understand that NPR is entirely coming from federal funding. It's entirely coming from a certain stance. And I know what you're thinking. Well, John, Congress, the executive branch, it comes and goes left and right, Republican and Democrat, every 4 years, every 8 years. There's a certain kind of governmentism or government power or power brokering or thought that's actually best described as statism. It's the supremacy of the state. It's inherently leftist, but even people who are Republicans are statists. They believe in the power and the ongoing control of people by the state. Case in point, any Republican that seeks like more than 1 or 2 terms in Congress is a statist, because they're after their own power. How can you believe that government should be limited and that power should not be vested in the hands of any one person too long and be someone like John McCain? That guy was a statist. He was not a conservative. Anybody that holds that kind of power for that long is not a conservative. Case in point, Calvin Coolidge. He took over for President Warren G. Harding when he passed away. He served out his full term. And so he was president for something like 6 years. And because of when he took over for Harding, he was eligible to run for president again. This would have ended up with him being president for something like 10 years. And he said that's too much power to be vested in any one person too long. So anyway, he said, I'm not running again, because Calvin Coolidge was a true conservative. So we have statism going on here, the power of the state, and this is the mouthpiece for that. This is the power of the state speaking for itself and advocating for itself. And you can't divorce anything that you hear on NPR with the statist slant, because everything on NPR is designed to increase the power and control of the government, right? Like, why would it go against its own interests? You're never going to hear anything truly conservative or truly anti-government on NPR. It's actually the most, probably one of the most insidious things out there. I know a few years ago you had a president talking about, or presidential candidate talk about how they would get rid of National Public Broadcasting, PBS. I would definitely get rid of that immediately. I would also get rid of NPR. But I wanted to talk about, bring it back in from these crazy tinfoil hat talks about what government is and why it's bad in all its forms and how this is one of the worst things. This is from NPR. This is on their website, April 28th, 2024. Why 911 emergency systems in 3 states went dead earlier. So they've got Aisha Rasco as the host. She's got somebody on who's going to talk about what happened with 911 going down in 3 states. Joining Rasco is Ram Dantu. He's the director of the Center of Information and Cybersecurity. He's the director of the Center for Information and Cybersecurity at the University of North Texas. So just to be clear, is he a government employee? Kind of. I mean, he first of all, he's an academic, so he works at the colleges, so he doesn't know anything about real life. He's a professor. We're going to ask a professor. This is typical NPR, right? We have a real world problem, something with applied problems, and we're going to talk to someone who deals purely in hypotheticals. And he's the director for the Center for Information and Cybersecurity at the University of North Texas. So what does that mean? Does the University of North Texas actually have like a cybersecurity division, or is he a professor of information and cybersecurity, like as a discipline? I'm sure you can get your degree in cybersecurity at this point. Anyway, he's someone who doesn't fucking know anything about anything. And it's amazing that I will say this because what am I? I'm a 911 dispatcher. I'm someone who literally answers the phone. NPR doesn't think to ask someone who answers the phone. They don't think to ask someone, probably best suited would be someone like Drew, someone who actually works at a comm center. They don't ask a state 911 coordinator. There's people who do that at the state level who coordinate all the 911 agencies in their state. Unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, 911s tend to be orchestrated at the state level. Everything works at a county level, right? Like you pay your county taxes, the courthouse where you live. You've got sheriff's office there. You've got communications center there. You've got 911 dispatchers who are working right there in the courthouse. That's how it is for most places. If you don't have that, it might be farmed out to a neighboring county or something like that. It's also possible in the rare case that you have state radios that aren't county entities. They're just covering certain counties that are unorganized or counties that don't have that infrastructure. I know in places like North Dakota, they have North Dakota Border Patrol radio that actually handle all the calls for a bunch of counties up there. So it's important to understand that most 911s are paid for and staffed and controlled locally, but there's some state level control there, whether it's with coordination or contracts, getting everyone to use the same equipment through crony deals, training, standards, testing, things like that. So there's some state coordination. What there generally is not, and this is good, is any kind of federal control over 911. The feds can't do anything well. And if we bring them into the mix, it's going to be bad. And but I know what you're saying. John, why are we talking about that? Well, I just got done talking about statist radio, statist control over things, ever-growing centralized power, and how that can be a bad thing. 911's like one of the last bastions of excellent local government. You know, if you have a problem with the way 911 works, you can go down to a county commission meeting and you can talk about it. So this is what they say. The host says, it's not something any of us want to experience. You're in an emergency, you need help, and you pick up the phone and dial 911 and in the soundbite of a busy tone, which is not what you heard when you dialed 911. So case in point, they already didn't do the research. When you dialed 911 during this outage, you didn't hear anything. Not a busy tone or a dial tone or anything else like that. You can't get through. Earlier this month, emergency systems in parts of Nevada, South Dakota, and all of Nebraska went dead for about 3 hours. There was more than that. They're failing to mention that there were several other states and parts of Wisconsin. Apparently, that was because workers installing a light pole in Missouri accidentally cut into a fiber line that was connected to 911 operations in those areas. How does one little light pole cause so much chaos? To talk more about that incident and related risk, I'm joined by Ram Dantu. He's the director of the Center of Information of Cybersecurity at the University of North Texas. Thanks for joining us. And imagine, I've got my big sweater on and my cup of coffee. Dantu, oh, thank you for having me. The light pole was being installed in Kansas City, Missouri, and emergency service weren't cut off there, but they were much farther away. How does that happen? First of all, that's a childish question. Dantu says the emergency services, these are all generally connected through fiber optic cables, fiber optic rings going across all these centers you can call. So if you go and cut a particular fiber by mistake, normally you're going to have one going on clockwise and another going on anti-clockwise. So I'm not sure exactly how the provider has installed this, but if you cut one, there should be a service on that other one. So that's kind of how that thing normally happens. I don't think there's necessarily any truth to that at all. That there's normally two rings and one's clockwise and one's anti-clockwise. I know that major power grids are alleged to be set up that way so that if you have some sort of localized incident, branches off in another direction so it's not nearby. No, it does not work that way. What you're talking about is a huge redundancy that boils down to connecting 911 PSAPs. There's almost 9,000 of these things. We don't have that level of infrastructure in this country. 8,200 PSAPs. I wonder if he knows the level of PSAPs. Well, in that case, I mean, it's hard to say how many people were unable to get through to 911 call centers. There were cases, I guess, where callers were asked to call a different line, or some cases to text. How often should we be concerned about that? So everyone who was told to call a different line, they still reached 911. What we actually went without was not 911 calls. We went without Annie and Allie data. We went without the ability necessarily to know what number you're calling from and your location. We were still able to take your phone calls. It's a huge, huge, huge misconception that 911 and non-emergency are not the same thing. I will tell people, my close friends who've known I've been a 911 dispatcher for years, and I will tell them about some crappy call I had. Like, somebody called me for this. There's an owl in their backyard. And they'll be like, somebody dialed 911 for that? I'm like, no, I answer non-emergency calls too. Who do you think answers that? And of course, it just never occurs to them. And it's one more thing about being a 911 dispatcher that's irritating, is they don't understand your role is to handle all the calls. I don't understand that it's just a different phone that rings. It's mildly irritating because it's just like, it's one more thing that they just don't get about your job, and it's one more thing that nobody thinks about. So we went without that capability. It's still bad though, because if somebody's in an emergency, they're going to only think dial 911, right? They're not going to check their social media. As blood pours into their eyes, they're not going to be trying to figure it out. They're going to be dialing 911. There's a chance you're going to have an emergency there that's not going to be responded to by dialing 911. A lot of agencies have this thing called Rapid SOS. And without getting too deeply into that, because I'm not an expert on Rapid SOS can populate your call, and it will note that someone there has dialed 911. And we did this all night, where 911 was not ringing, but we could see that 911 had dialed, and we would call those people back and make sure that they were okay. So the scope of people not being able to dial 911 was much more limited than these people think. Dan2 says this is more or less life and death situation because they cannot reach 911. So the ambulance cannot be dispatched. As you know, every minute counts. That's not true. 911 has nothing to do with dispatching ambulances. If someone sends me a fax machine from an old folks home saying, hey, we've got a patient here that needs an ambulance, I'm still dispatching the ambulance. If you run out into the street as a police car runs by and you wave at them, and you say, hey, my dad's having a heart attack, he can raise me on the radio and I can dispatch an ambulance. I just say this to indicate that what he's talking about is not necessarily true. We had the ability to dispatch ambulances were not impacted. The ability to make direct contact with me quickly and easily was impacted. But we were not nearly as helpless as he's making us out to be. So the host says, yeah, is there anything that can be done about that? Dan2 says, yes, when you make a phone call, there's actually a line that's going from your house to the 911 center end to end. When it comes next generation 911, in case there's a disaster in Texas, they could be routed to California and bring them back. I don't know what he's talking about. It is not a wire connection. It can't go from some other route and get connected. I don't know what he's talking about. He says, when you make a phone call, there is an actual line that is going from your house to 911 center end to end. No. So this is as far as I understand it. You dial 911, your phone actually calls a tower. Your phone doesn't call another phone, it calls a tower. Every time you use your cell phone, it calls a tower, and the tower calls the other person, right? It's actually a triangle is what you're doing. Call out to the closest tower. It's going to reach the closest one. That tower is designated for a specific site, so a specific PSAP. That will ring it through to me through the internet. Like, the phone is largely internet based, and then I'll receive it from the tower that way. So it's not line to line, end to end, the way that he's describing. Next generation 911, which is what we use, we do have ways of rerouting 911 calls. So like, if you are in an area and 911 completely goes down just in your county, there's a backup center. Or if it's overwhelmed in your county, like all of your lines are full, it goes to another county. And then they'll attempt to bounce it back to you to buffer that, right? You know, if you live in Abraham Lincoln County, and Hannibal Hamlin County and Andrew Jackson County are next to you, and your Abraham Lincoln County is completely full, maybe the call will be transferred over to Hannibal Hamlin County. And then they'll answer it, and then they'll realize, oh, there's a problem over in Abraham Lincoln. And then Hannibal Hamlin will send it back over to Abraham Lincoln. And in that process of sending it out and coming back in, hopefully those lines clear up in the meantime. There is a state PSAP of last resort, where if there's a massive outage, we have massive routing directional problems, it goes to one PSAP. That's the end. After that, it doesn't go anywhere. It bounces around, goes nowhere, goes onto another plane of existence. But after that PSAP of last resort, whatever state you're in, whether it's Sacramento in California or Austin in Texas or whatever, it doesn't cross state lines. What he's talking about, California receiving calls from Texas, there's nothing, that doesn't happen. Moreover, if you're a 911 dispatcher in California and you're receiving a 911 phone call from Texas, you have no way of transferring that back. There's not a button you can push to do that. What would the hell be the point of you as a 911 dispatcher in California receiving a 911 phone call in Texas? Do you know what you would do in that case? You'd be like, you need to call the non-emergency number in whatever county you live. Call Terrell County down in Texas. I can't do anything for you. So that's why that routing doesn't exist, because it wouldn't be helpful. It doesn't help to alert someone in public safety in a different state who has zero ability to dispatch assets to you. He's talking about how we would have this continuity of operations plan to continue to dispatch ambulances from Texas to California. It doesn't exist. That would never work. And I've mentioned this before. It's because there's something like 8,200 911 PSAPs. I don't have the ability to, on the fly, figure out exactly which PSAP someone should be going to, because the way that's all divided up, it's not even always logical, right? It's not even always by county line. Sometimes there's counties that have a 911 dispatch agency, and then within those counties, there's a city that has a 911 dispatch agency. And so am I supposed to figure out if this person has a city address or a county address in Terrell County, Texas? Are you kidding me? I don't have time to do that. I don't have the ability to do that. But moreover, I don't have the ability to pull a switch and send them off to, even if I knew where they are, I don't have the ability to transfer across state lines. And for this, what he's saying to be the truth, I would have to have that ability. I would have to have some sort of power to be able to direct a 911 call that I have to a very, very, very specific and very, very, very far away place that I know nothing about. And again, what that essentially comes down to is 8,200 buttons in my comm center that I don't have. So this guy is making this up. He's straight making it up. It's not based on real use experience at all. It's like based off of something that he saw in a movie or something. And here again, NPR just has him on to talk about this like he knows what he's talking about. He doesn't. I have no way of doing that. If I received a 911 phone call from Texas or from California, I would say, you're out of luck, Chuck. I would do my best to like Google the number for him, and then I would hang up. There's nothing I could do. Rasco says, in San Francisco recently, we did see the modernization could come with its own pitfalls. Yeah, like toilets and no one using them. They had a computer shut down only hours after opening a new call system. Like, what are some of the issues that can happen even with, a modern system? He says, obviously, there are several reasons why there'll be a glitch, because they're setting up and they should have various software and various different servers they use. There's a database. There's a call server. There's a dispatch server. Several servers are connected. So when they're actually working together, if it's brand new, that means they're not tested as much as it should be or could be. Within a call center, if you're literally just launching the call center, you're going to have problems like that. That's where IT comes in and fixes it. That's the same for any office that uses a phone or computers. So, very stupid question. The host says, so the Federal Communications Commission is declining to comment to NPR, but says it's investigating. So let me get this straight. The Federal Communications Commission, an executive agency, is refusing to answer questions by NPR, which purports to be a national outlet for media, the way that you would talk to the people. So the FCC is straight up saying, we're not going to tell the American public what's going on. I don't want to not glance over that. FCC says they're investigating, but they're not They're not telling NPR. They're not telling essentially the government's own public information office what it is. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, I mean, they have the right to investigate without disclosing everything to the public if it's a crime. If what they're investigating is a crime, then they should be doing that. If what they say is true, that this is literally a construction crew installing a light pole, cutting a fiber line, there's no reason for the FCC to not release whatever its findings are, the status of its investigation. The only reason why the FCC would not comment is if they would be compromising something. And if this was really the fault of a light pole installation crew in Kansas City, Missouri, nobody would care. It would just be like, whoops, like, I guess maybe, whoever owns the construction crew might be liable for lawsuits or something, I guess, hypothetically. But why is it that we wouldn't have the left hand talking to the right hand and being free and transparent with the American people? Here you have a federal executive agency with tremendous power, by the way, not telling the American people what happened because they're declined to comment to NPR, also a federal agency. Says it's investigating. What would you like to personally see happen after these outages happen? They're not going to address the fact that FCC is not saying. Dan2 says, yeah, the number one is availability, and 911 network has to be available all the time. Here we go. You guys ready for that big statist propaganda stuff I promised you at the start of the show? Here we go. This is what he says, and this is so insidious, and you think it sounds so damn good, and you don't realize what it means. You don't realize how ugly and terrible this is. You don't realize how communist this is. There should be some regulation from the federal government so that they have to construct their networks so that they can route these calls to different networks or different routes so that you will never, never lose a call. Every time you get the federal government involved, it's like pooping the bed. I guarantee you that no federal regulation can make the system work better. And what he's talking about, them working between states, doesn't exist. And the outage that he's talking about wasn't caused by a fiber line being cut by a construction crew in Kansas City, Missouri. So the federal regulations that he's calling for, govern me harder, daddy, wouldn't fix anything that he's talking about. This guy doesn't understand any of these things, and it makes me mad because NPR plucks him like some sort of resident expert on what's going on. He's the director of information and cybersecurity at the University of North Texas. I'm just a guy that stayed at a Holiday Inn last night, but I happen to answer a lot of 911 phone calls, and I happen to know how they work. And this guy's full of shit. And the main reason why he was pulled in here to say this was to make you afraid, to say 911's got to work all the time. 911 didn't work at all. Just a bunch of people sitting around with nothing to do. I literally had a friend ask me if I just had the day off because 911 didn't work. They're like, oh, does that mean you have to go to work today? Yes. 911 is like 5% of what I do. Literally answering 911 calls, picking up and saying 911, where's your emergency? 5%. I do so much more than that. And it doesn't always make for very good podcasting, but I do a lot more than that. Not just emergency phone calls, non-emergency, police ban, radio traffic, teletypes, warrants. I do so much. I wish I could take you all with me to work so that you could see everything that I do. But that'll never happen. But anyway, no, we were not helpless. We were not powerless. We did not just have a bunch of 911 dispatchers in 3 to 5 to 6 states all just sitting around on thetheir hands, not doing anything. We did not have people dying by the tens of thousands. Case in point, if 911 really was down for 3 hours and we were totally in it, had no ability to affect the outcome of anyone's lives in that amount of time. Do you have any idea how many incidents occurred in those 3 hours that required 911 response? Thousands and thousands of people were in car accidents during those 3 hours. We had thousands and thousands of heart attacks and other things, other emergencies of all kinds. Where's all the procession for the dead for all those lost during those 3 hours in which there was no 911 emergency response? Just think about it. I urge you to think critically about it. We don't have like a national day of mourning because all the people who couldn't get an ambulance that needed one. Why is that? It's because it's not what happened. Anyway, people just make stuff up. They put these people on NPR, and then they talk to you about how we need more federal regulations to increase things, and then it's all just based off of nothing. It's insidious. Do not listen to NPR, but no matter what source you listen to, even me, don't take it at face value. I'm not an expert on everything. All I could do is tell you that this guy's full of shit. That's all I'm here to do today. Let's do some memes. Ah, yes. An old teddy bear on the basketball team. You guys remember when we were kids and we used to have a lot more animals playing for a lot more sports teams? Seems like a thing that just happened a lot more in the 90s. I like this t-shirt. For good old active shooter, I bet he could score 3 points easily. Study reveals that listening to music at loud volumes can actually kill you. Crank that shit up. I don't think this is true either. Just since we're discussing truth and lies today, I don't think that that's real. How loud does it have to be before it kills you? Did you know your lower back hurts because you probably deserve it, you piece of shit? Yeah, the next time you're complaining of pain, maybe like evaluate. Did I do something to deserve this? One of my favorite authors says when something bad happens to a person, they always complain about how they didn't do anything to deserve it. But when something good happens to them, they never stop and examine what they did to examine or what they did to deserve those good things. Something to think about. Continue to think critically today. You probably got other dudes. I don't even have a dad. Sad. When you feel a sudden chest pain, today's the day. You know, I didn't see Finding Nemo, which is what I think this is from. And so I probably read that wrong. So I'm sorry to any Finding Nemo fans, but it's still funny to think of someone being excited about finally being shown the door. Ready to feel old? Buddy, I do not care. I do not want to be here. When I was young, I didn't like the middle years. And I'm not a huge fan now. Young or old, who cares? The phone line is cut. A vessel eternally rotting. No heaven. Two hells. This is how I respond to a lot of things anymore now that I've been stressed out. Someone will say something to me, and I just respond way over the top about how I should not be here or whatever. It's very, very dark. It's very, very depressing, but very, very good. Last one. It's me doing a podcast. I honestly don't know why I'm still alive. Kendra, the podcast. This interaction actually occurred between the two of us recently, where I was talking about just the car accident I almost had with a deer. I mentioned that last week, the week before, how close I came to dying. I'm just like, I don't know why I'm still alive. And she just like, to podcast. It was very funny. And I'm bringing back this meme from 2006 or whatever, the overexcited girlfriend, because that was exactly her attitude. All right, Salamander's here. Yeah, I don't do this every Monday, just so you know. About to sign off. Somehow I managed to go 33 minutes. I'm trying to go only like 17 or less. I need to like set a clock right here so I know not to go longer. We had a whole bunch of rain. My grass is really long, but it's too wet to mow. My big lawnmower, I need to get that fixed. I got to drive it out of town to do that. So I got to load that up and drive it out of town and get it fixed. And I have to mow with like a regular lawnmower. And I got to get the brakes on my truck fixed. And I know this is just 2 tasks, and with it hanging over me, I feel like I can't accomplish anything else. I'm one of these people that just, I don't handle stress well, which is like, holy shit, you're a 911 dispatcher, you're a multitasker, and you're upset because you have to get your brakes on your truck fixed and you have to get your mower fixed. What it is actually the expenditure of time and trying to figure out when best to do that. Right. Because like the thing is with getting a vehicle fixed anymore, I don't know how it used to be, but it used to be like you took your vehicle to a place and they fixed it and you were done. Now it's like, I'll take a vehicle in and it's just like, can I get this fixed? And I'm like, sure thing. And then And then I'll go talk to them like, is it fixed? And they're like, oh man, we're looking at like next week. And I'm like, well, what is the point of bringing it here to you, and when should I do that? They don't care because they have so many vehicles to fix that they just always have vehicles all the time. So it's not like you can like say, well, I'm taking my business elsewhere because everywhere's backlogged. So you just have to leave your vehicle and then it has to be worth it to them. I literally had a vehicle once that like needed to be fixed, but I guess it wasn't a big enough deal. So it sat there for over a year. Because the guy could make more money off of working on other vehicles, and he, I didn't pay a storage fee or anything for it, but my vehicle literally sat on someone else's property for over a year. It was a whole story. And same thing with my lawnmower. Like, I need to go get that and drop that off. And when am I going to get that back? It's the time expenditures and just wanting to get it over with. Keeps me from enjoying things. Thanks to both of you who dropped an Income Center coffee. Probably the last one since nobody cares. We'll see you on Thursday night. We got a case dropping we're going to be talking about. I would like to give you a preview of that now. Let me read Drew's text message about what it will be, because Drew talks to me about stuff, and then it's not always at a time where I can remember things. Charles Ramsey from the Ariel Castro case. Great interviews and great 911 calls with good outcome. It's a good case, something with good outcome. I said I'll start digging into it. That was on Tuesday, April 23, 6 days ago. I've done zero research in that amount of time. So research starts today so that I can be informed and bring you a good show on Thursday. We will see you then.